Why is the death of a right-wing provocateur who nobody elected to anything a bigger deal than the assassination of a former state house speaker who was killed in her home by someone impersonating law enforcement? Welcome back to another episode of Concepts of Pod. We are recording this on Thursday, September 11th, 24 years after terrorists killed over 3,000 people in New York City, Washington, D.C., and in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, we are processing another tragedy in American society, the assassination of Charlie Kirk yesterday at a Turning Point USA rally, which, well, obviously, we don't agree with anything that was being said at that rally. It is an absolute travesty that a woman and two young children lost their husband and father, and I don't know how much more you can say about that.
I don't know. It's hard to put into words, I guess. Yesterday, I was talking to a couple of people about Charlie Kirk's assassination and that my whole career has been spent fighting against the misinformation that he was putting out. And this is an act of gun violence. And he was a victim of gun violence. But on the flip side, he was also a victim of his own words and his own morals, which I think is a very interesting question to pose.
I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational.
And I also want to mention that at the same time that was happening, there were also 3 people who were killed at a school in Colorado, and that those are not the only shootings that have happened this week in the United States either. And the moment that Charlie Kirk was assassinated, he was being asked about how many shootings have happened in the United States so far this year.
Under a banner that quite literally said, "Prove me wrong."
Yeah. And like Shayna said, how she spent her entire career kind of fighting back against Charlie Kirk's misinformation. And Charlie Kirk in Turning Point USA was headquartered a few miles away from my university, and he was always on campus. They always had a very large presence. I went to Arizona State University, and so he was at their Turning Point events in person doing a lot of stuff, and I'm just completely in shock. Since I was 18, this is somebody I've been around, and I am just still stunned. I'm almost in disbelief in a way.
Oh, yeah, no, thinking about the figures in our political system right now, you think of, the older guys as the old guard, Donald Trump, not going to be around forever, but I thought of Charlie Kirk as someone who was going to shape the future of discourse in this country for decades to come. And to think that we're never going to hear his voice again, as annoying as that voice was to me, it's almost worse. Because
I'm not going to see another video of his pop up where he's arguing with someone, and it's weird, like we said, we didn't agree with anything that he ever said, but I know that he was a part of all of our lives in many ways, being part of the political community. And even though we were on different sides, he also showed up at my college campus and other college campuses that I worked on. There was someone who I was in college in 2020 during the presidential primaries who was a huge part of Turning Point USA. She's now a journalist and she's very conservative, but she was someone who knew Charlie Kirk really well and was one of her friends. There's someone else who I just recently worked with on another campaign in the last year who was also very close with him. And it's weird, because obviously this man spread a lot of hate, a lot of disinformation, and a lot of bigotry into this world. But I see these people who are my friends on the other side of the aisle mourning the loss of someone who's a close friend. It's I don't know. It's very mind-boggling in a lot of ways. Kind of like you said, Simone. It's disbelief.
Yeah, and I think what's also important to note, too, is that this death was politicized in a way that we have not seen a lot of gun violence deaths specifically. We don't have a lot of videos of these school shootings of children actually directly being murdered. If they are there, they are held under lock and key. They're used by law enforcement, etc. And so this incident went viral so quickly. They took an hour before they announced his death. And so many people didn't even know what they were watching when they clicked on it. And I just want to say to our supporters. If you have not watched it, please don't. It's very graphic. And also, if you feel a weird sense of grief or of guilt for feeling that grief, just know that it's completely normal to feel empathy for somebody whose life was violently taken by something all of us have been fighting against, which is gun violence in the United States. So it's only natural to feel just absolutely horrified at what's been happening.
Yeah, no, and on the flip side, it's interesting because I've also heard a lot of people use this moment, like we said, to talk about the rhetoric he had and his role in inciting what ultimately happened. And obviously, nobody should be celebrating violence, but it is understandable to take a second to look at the irony and the nuance of this situation and to be able to hold multiple complex emotions at the same time. I really think this moment is making people reflect on really everything in a way they haven't in a long time. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we as Americans need to take a step back. And I really hope we can use this to, return to civility a little bit. And
maybe it'll be a unifying almost type of thing.
Not if Donald Trump has anything to say about it. But in the meantime, we asked some of our supporters how they feel Democrats should respond to this political violence, because Donald Trump has been trying to frame this as a left-perpetrated crime. Even before we know anything about who the shooter is, they don't even have a suspect in custody at this point, and we won't speculate on any further information about an active investigation that will probably change 1,000 times between the time we're recording this and the time you see it. But I wanted to take this moment to share with you, our audience, and the world how the Democratic base, our supporters, really feel about what's going on, so nobody tells lies about who we are as Democrats. And the first comment that really stuck out to me was, as the unified front, all Dems must unequivocally condemn political violence and the rhetoric that incites it, call on every Republican to do the same, and immediately call out any speech counter to this condemnation by any member of either party, publicly and by naming names. And someone else said, which I also think is a really good point, gun violence will not stop at the ballot box. I think tougher gun laws have to be enacted. Background checks need to be checked before selling a gun. Too many guns are in the hands of those who should not have them.
Yeah, what I really appreciate about that second comment as well, I appreciate both, but the second comment brings me back to the fact that the university that this happened on has open carry, and it's something that they very recently enacted on campus. And so that just makes it so much harder to identify who the bad guy was. I mean, we've already seen they took 2 people into custody, one of which I think there was a viral video of this man being arrested because he was open carrying, but they were proven to be not the suspects. So it's another thing that a lot of these schools need to kind of acknowledge, that when you allow these things to happen on your campus, when you allow guns to be there, guns lead to gunfire. That's their entire purpose.
I remember when I was going to school at the University of Iowa, they were fighting pretty hard to have an open carry policy. And I don't remember if I've mentioned it before on the podcast, but I got my start in politics through creating my own organization. It was originally called SAS, Students Against School Shootings. The whole point is, who's for school shootings? And I started it when I was in high school, 2 days after the Parkland shooting happened in 2018, which was on February 14th, which is 2 days before my 18th birthday. And at the same time, there were a bunch of really crazy pieces of legislation that were trying to go through the Iowa legislature to basically gut the Iowa gun code and allow you to go to Walmart on any given day as a 16 to 18-year-old and go buy a gun and bring it to school and things like that. It was really bad. And thankfully, the piece of legislation did not go through. But, doesn't mean that Republicans and conservatives were going to stop trying to put it through. And the group eventually morphed into March for Our Lives, which is the national organization started by the Parkland students. But yeah, when I was in college, they were trying to pass open carry, and I believe it thankfully didn't pass that year. I don't know what's happened at this point. Iowa's pretty close to having a supermajority in the legislature on the Republican side, but this is an issue that's happening everywhere right now. And, we heard after Uvalde, there were good guys with guns there. Good guys with guns didn't do anything. Same thing here at the campus in Utah. There were probably a bunch of good guys, if you want to call them that, with guns, They didn't do anything. What does a good guy with a gun mean? I know it's a whole separate conversation we could get into, but that whole theory doesn't seem to be playing out very well right now.
Yeah, Uvalde was actually, I remember when that happened, and it was interesting. It felt like a moment where change actually might have been possible. And I wonder if maybe, hopefully, if we do this right as a country, this can be another one where we can come together and realize, like, yeah, there is a problem in this country that's leading to deaths. And I do not make this comparison lightly, but I think there are important lessons to be learned from our history, both ancient and recent. And it is 24 years to the day after 9/11, after our country was changed in ways we don't even know, because none of us really remember a world before 9/11. Even, at least from what I know about it, we may not have done everything right when that happened, but America was attacked and we took it on together. I mean, that unity in our country, I haven't felt since the day the military got bin Laden.
So I was one when 9/11 happened, and we were living in Nebraska. Actually, 9/11, 2001 is the day that my mom found out that she was pregnant with my younger brother.
Wow.
And the way she kind of tells the story is that she was like, do I really want to bring another kid into this world with what's going on here? And, life has been mostly good for the most part, obviously. But in terms of like a country, there's been a lot of really crazy, really bad things that have happened in the world. And I don't know, I felt like that was a very profound thing that every year that goes by, it makes me start to think about that more and more. And I always remember that every year around this time is, what are we doing to try and make the world better? Do we want to keep bringing people into this world? Because it's kind of fucked up right now, like to say the least, But I felt that was like, I don't know, a very profound thing to share within the conversation that we're talking about right now.
Yeah, and I think too, what happened to patriotism? Did the bad guys succeed 24 years ago in getting us to destroy ourselves? I mean, we were so quick to come together when we were attacked, to celebrate when we avenged the attack, and now we're tearing ourselves apart here. And I mean, the way that families, friendships are divided by politics, I think we've all dealt with that in our personal lives. I know, Simone, you were telling me recently that it's hit you kind of hard.
Yeah, my grandfather, he's been around my whole life. He's 77-ish. He might be 78 now, but he recently got re-diagnosed with cancer again. But I've actually been estranged from him since November because of the amount of vitriol he ingests every single day by watching Fox News. It became impossible to have a conversation with him. For context, I worked on a state legislative campaign for a school public teacher to get her elected. And on election day, my grandfather and my uncle texted me and basically told me that I was ruining the country and I was ruining their financial stability. And that was really hard. And my grandfather eventually apologized after my family really encouraged him to. But November 2024, it was just so much harder to swallow. I just can't keep having those fights of this isn't real, this is real. But it sucks because I'm in a position where now I love my grandfather so much. I used to idolize him when I was younger. And now it just feels like he can't have a conversation with me that doesn't have anything to do with just hating my career and my values and who I am as a person. And it's a lot to deal with, that guilt, and then also kind of juggle the fact that, he may pass away within the year or even less. And that's just hard. And I know there are a ton of folks who have lost a lot of people to the MAGA cult, to the Fox News drain. And I just want to say that I see you, I'm with you. I'm also struggling with that. And it's very hard to navigate. And I'm carrying a lot of mixed emotions these days right now. That's for sure.
I'm so sorry. And I mean, my grandfather passed when I was 16 years old. This was 2 years before Trump entered politics. And I actually only talked politics. I think only have one memory of a political conversation I had with him. And I idolized him. He was my guiding light for how to treat others with respect, how to care about other people. And I remember when I was in 5th grade, we were all on the schoolyard taunting each other about who our parents were voting for, doing the little mock election. And I was obviously Team Obama because my parents were, and that's how it was when you were in 5th grade. And we were being little schoolyard bullies about who everyone was voting for. And I brought that home, and I don't know what the dumb joke I made about John McCain was, but I made a dumb joke about John McCain. And my grandfather sat me down. He said, hey, you don't know who everyone's voting for. I actually happen to like and respect John McCain, and I'm going to be voting for him. And that doesn't change whether or not people are good people just because they disagree. And it always stuck with me. And he also at some point not long after, I think, gave me a copy of the Constitution and Declaration of Independence that I still keep with me, that
I love
funny
that.
enough was, I now realize, a mailer from the Cato Institute, but it's a really nice looking book and it means a lot to me. And I think there's something to it being a think tank that I don't happen to agree with, kind of adding to the story, because that's what it reminds me of, that civility, that ability to debate and discuss and differ in opinion, that's supposed to be what makes America great.
I
Yeah,
completely agree.
it is. I on the other side of this, I'm gonna try to get through this. So a few days ago, my grandmother passed away, and she was born in Wyoming and lived almost her whole life in Nebraska. So two pretty red places. And she kind of grew up in a Mormon family, but then was like adopted out of it. She's got a very interesting family history, but she's grown up in like pretty red, pretty Republican, conservative areas. And she has always been the Democrat on her family's side. My mom decided to marry a Jewish man, and a lot of her family wasn't necessarily the most supportive. And my grandmother was like, well, what are the names of the holidays? Can I go to synagogue with you?
Wow.
And that was the first thing she would say. And as soon as my parents got married and my mom wanted to convert to Judaism, she was like, okay, well, what do I need to learn? And when she had kids, she was like, okay, well, what are all the holidays I need to start buying cards for? And so for every Jewish holiday, and if you're Jewish, you know how many holidays there are.
Yep.
Me and both of my brothers would get a card from her for every Jewish holiday. All of our wrapping paper and stuff was always, for Hanukkah, always Hanukkah themed, things like that. And she was a very devout Christian. She loved being Christian. She loved Christmas, but she was always so accepting of everything else around her, even though she grew up in an environment that was not accepting of all of those things. And I just think this shows, there's a very big spectrum here of how all of our grandparents grew up and how, they ended up, and where, they've ended up, towards the end of their lives, and how there's still similar things happening in like our own generation of people, and even how we, came out of all those things. So I think it's just very interesting to see that patterns repeat and continue, but there's always those good people in there, no matter what part of history we're talking about, no matter where you've come from.
Yeah, whether it's religion or politics, I really think it is at its core that ability to maintain your own beliefs while being accepting of those of others. And as we have this conversation about political violence and how our discourse will change, we certainly need to temper our rhetoric and turn down the temperature, because that's everyone's responsibility. But that doesn't mean silencing what we believe and silencing our dissent. And it's going to be tough as activists, as pundits going forward. Obviously, we would love to have as much of an influence on politics as Charlie Kirk does, but we are working in the same media ecosystem, and the violence in that space, because we don't have Secret Service protection, we're not elected officials, we don't have law enforcement behind us, that's scary. But more than that, the fear of losing our ability to speak up for our values, whether it's left or right values, nobody should lose that. And one supporter said, I agree acknowledging the tragedy of deaths due to violence is democratic, but allowing a country to then blame Democrats for those deaths is another story. How does one stand up against that? And that is in reference to, I think, as we've discussed, Donald Trump has blamed the Democrats for this violence. And I actually want to show, for any of our viewers who haven't seen it, Donald Trump's initial response to Charlie Kirk's assassination, because it's worth seeing and digesting and unpacking.
To my great fellow Americans, I am filled with grief and anger at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk on a college campus in Utah. Charlie inspired millions, and tonight, all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot, who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. He fought for liberty, democracy, justice, and the American people. He's a martyr for truth and freedom. It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it, as well as those who go after our judges, law enforcement officials, and everyone else who brings order to our country. From the attack on my life in Butler, Pennsylvania last year, which killed a husband and father, to the attacks on ICE agents, to the vicious murder of a healthcare executive in the streets of New York, to the shooting of House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and 3 others, radical left political violence has hurt too many innocent people and taken too many lives. Tonight, I ask all Americans to commit themselves to the American values for which Charlie Kirk lived and died, the values of free speech, citizenship, the rule of law, and the patriotic devotion and love of God.
That reminds me of something. I need to pull it up real quick to make sure I read this right. I know I sent it to both of you yesterday. There was a list of all of the radical right-wing terrorist attacks, if you want to call them that have happened. And I'm going to read those off, just like Donald Trump read off all of the ones from radical left-wing people. The man who targeted and killed Democratic State Rep Melissa Hortman was a Trump supporter. The man who targeted the home of Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro was a Trump supporter. The men who wanted to hang Mike Pence on January 6th were Trump supporters. The man who targeted and killed the son of Obama-appointed District Judge Esther Salas was a Trump supporter. The man who tried to kidnap Nancy Pelosi and assaulted her husband with a hammer was a Trump supporter. The men who were convicted of trying to kidnap Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer were Trump supporters. The man who sent pipe bombs to the homes of Obama and Biden were Trump supporters. And yeah, here's the thing. No type of violence is okay from either side.
Yeah, and
period. End of discussion. Like,
put that aside too. We do not know who did this. We know nothing.
Conspiracy theories.
And isn't the whole tenet of the American justice system to find the facts first and not to accuse people of things?
Yep.
But here we are, just the president of the United States accusing an entire political party of inciting violence, while at the same time supposedly defending free speech. And that Paul Pelosi example is a really good example, because I seem to remember Don Jr. posting some dumb joke about his Halloween costume being Paul Pelosi in his underwear with the hammer after he had his brain bashed in and was still in the hospital. But
yep. I also just think it's really interesting that he decided to just talk about how we shouldn't have violence after he just renamed the Department of Defense the Department of War. But
yeah. And put that aside, why is the death of a right-wing provocateur who nobody elected to anything a bigger deal than the assassination of a former state house speaker who was killed in her home by someone impersonating law enforcement? We didn't even talk about it for a day. I remember we covered it on the podcast because it was the same day as No King's Day, and that story got absolutely no national pickup. She was an elected official, and I'm not saying
her and her husband were murdered, and this guy also tried to assassinate 2 other people. Like, this was 4 people involved in this, and there was a huge list of names. Like, no news.
And I'm
Trump
not
didn't
saying,
want to call them.
And I'm not saying that Charlie Kirk's assassination isn't a tragedy too. Just like any other shooting on a college campus or a high school campus or a middle school campus or an elementary school campus, I can't believe I'm even saying that, or a tragedy. But I don't understand the media incentives and the media coverage here, and maybe it's because we had live streamed footage of it happening and all the rage bait accounts could get their bag off this and it blew up that way. But I don't even know what to say. Just the
Yeah.
double standard here with the way Democrats are victims of this. And I have not seen a single serious Democrat celebrate this. I mean, I've seen some idiots on social media like there are with anything. I've not seen a single serious Democrat celebrate this, unlike the Paul Pelosi attack.
Completely agree. And then in addition to that, somebody I used to work with too sent me a link today, and God, what was it called? She said, hey, please be careful. The website is charliesmurderers.com, expose Charlie's murderers. And they are listing private citizens and their social media posts, their addresses, everything they can find of them on this website.
God.
I don't find that very peaceful or very much denouncing violence.
Sounds like a
That
hit
sounds like
list.
yep, exactly that. A
Charlie
hit
Kirk
list.
was known for doxing people. That was one of the things that brought him to fame, was doxing people. I got doxed several years ago by someone in the name of Charlie Kirk because they wanted to dox me because of, I don't even remember what it was about. Probably just because I was a Democrat talking online. And they were like, I'm doing this for Charlie Kirk. And I was like, cool, thanks for posting my personal address, my parents' address, my credit card number, all this stuff online. For what reason? For what reason?
I don't know, but what I do know is that all of this became okay when Donald Trump turned our politics into a reality show. And actually, I want to talk about one other part of this, the Trump of it all, if you will, because I saw some other discourse, and I'll let our viewers be the judge. They saw the video. You guys saw the video too. I'm not going to speculate because I don't know, but there has been speculation that that video of Trump was, if not entirely produced by, at least enhanced by AI. And it looked like it. You could see there was a glitch in his hands at one point. His body's barely moving. My theory is that they spent hours recording and used AI to splice together 3 minutes of usable footage. Actually, I don't know.
Yeah.
It happened so quickly after the shooting, too, though. I don't even know what they did. But regardless, my point about this is not to speculate about things I don't know about Trump, but rather to point out another double standard, which is if President Biden last year had put out a video that looked like that after Trump was shot in Butler, Pennsylvania, could you imagine the stories that would be coming out about, is he even in the Oval Office? Is he even president? What's the deal with his health? And I think it actually brings back to mind a story that was all the rage before this happened, the speculation about Trump's health, which I think was a very ironic online left discourse where if you didn't really know what was going on, you saw a lot of people asking, is Trump dead? Yada, yada. What's going on with him? I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did anyone really believe that he was dead, or were we just pointing out the irony of the double standard in the media here?
I was pointing out the irony when I tweeted about it, but I also did it when only like 3 accounts had speculated. I think by the end of the night, people who were just seeing it genuinely thought he was dead. Apologies. But it's the complete hypocrisy of it all.
Yeah, and the death of irony.
Uh-huh.
I think a lot of the social media stuff, too, from what you're saying, a lot of it's very Newsom-esque, I'll say, and I got to give Gavin Newsom credit for what he's doing on social media right now because he is a master of dramatic irony with this stuff. You've got the Trump supporters now saying the governor's posting crazy stuff, and then everyone's like, wait a second, you're saying he's crazy for posting the way your guy posts. It's 4D chess.
Exactly.
And one thing I actually saw about Gavin Newsom's digital operation that I saw from an interview he was doing at a panel, somebody asked him, do you personally approve all of those tweets that come out from your press office? And he said, no, but I have a kill switch, which basically means that he's got people in his office who he trusts to run this strategy, and he tells them no when he sees something, which I just think is a much better way to approach this than most Democrats do, because I think you've all worked in various Democratic campaign organizations where you can't even put out a statement until the principal signs off, and sometimes that can take like 12 hours, and by the time you get the sign off, you can't respond because it's over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, and I think we are finally seeing Democrats start to drop that at least and try new things. And we here at New Digital Now are here to responsibly and guided by supporters like you push that envelope. And I think a good example of Democrats finally getting around to it is actually the Epstein files with that despicable letter that we saw Trump drew for Epstein, which, I mean, that was a child's body, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of the people doing
Yeah.
analyses on his signature and stuff, and I don't know. I think that's something that's a big part of, I guess we could call pop culture now, which I really hate
I don't
saying that.
know. I
But
mean,
I think the rest of that would be really good to discuss in part 2 of our episode.
oh, yeah, no, I think that the way politics and pop culture have melded is truly, I don't want to say that on its own is necessarily good or bad, but it's something that Democrats have failed to grasp. And I think it's been
Okay.
why our party's been so ineffective. And like we said, we have a lot to discuss. This is all happening fast, and we're still taking in, reflecting. So we are going to listen to a few more supporter thoughts and comments on everything that's unfolding, and we will be back to you soon with the next episode.
Yeah. Thank you all.
We felt it was important to at least talk about this big moment right now as it's happening. But as y'all know, the news never stops, and there's a lot of stuff that's happened. And don't worry, I promise we're going to talk about all of it.